Yeah.
Okay.
Single camera. This is multi-camera.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi, my name is Suzanne Ford. My pronouns are she, her.
So do you want me seated now?
Yes.
Okay.
So you're over here.
Sure. So my journey with SF Pride as an organization is actually kind of long for me. I started marching in the parade when I was still a teenager. This is back in 2001. And I became so addicted to this idea of entering the space of just pure affirmation and joy that I started marching in every year. I marched in the parade every year. And as of 2025, this will be my 25th consecutive year involved with Pride as a participant. And then around 2016, the then president, Michelle Miao, invited me to join the board. So I ran for a seat, I won. And in 2022, after having served 6 years on the board, I became president. And so I did that job for 2 years. And I finally concluded my 8 years of board service, 2 of them as president, in October 2024. Really lovely journey, probably the hardest job I ever had. Not to mention, it's pro bono work. We're all volunteers on the board of directors. And so because of term limits, which I do believe in, that's when I technically termed off of the board of SF Pride. I became president emeritus as of the end of 2024. And now my new venture is serving as the board president of the Mensa Foundation, which is now a 55-year-old organization that's aimed at unleashing human intelligence for the benefit of humanity.
For me, I marched, 2016 was the first resistance contingent, and I carried the banner that year at the front of the parade with the board contingent. And that changed my life. Like I'd been to Pride one time before that. I had come out maybe a year before that. And walking down that street with that banner, I knew I had it. Like I knew that I was in the right place, and I ran for the board the following year in 2017. But you know, we served together on the board. I was treasurer, Wynn was secretary. We both co-founded the only PGA endorsed queer golf tournament in the world together. And through that process, Wynn had more experience on the board, and Wynn had more experience in the queer community than I did. I was relatively new to be in those spaces and to be doing the work. And so it was really informative. Wynn taught me when to say things, when not to, what were the right things to say, how should I say them. And we developed this trust with each other through that process. You know, I knew I could trust Wynn. Wynn didn't throw me over the bus, under the bus. Wynn would take me aside and say, you may not have wanted to have said that way. And so we trusted each other. And then I became interim executive director in 2022, in February of 2022. And Wynn was on the board, and you know, Wynn was instrumental in the decision to hire me as the interim executive director. And then when it came time that they made me the permanent executive director, Wynn kind of led that fight and supported me. And you know, it's been 3 tough years at San Francisco Pride to come out of the pandemic. All our reserves were gone. We've had to rebuild the organization. And there were so many times where it was apparent I didn't have all the skill set that you needed. Nobody probably could, but it was painfully apparent to me. And in those moments, Wynn would say, you're the exact person for this job. So I think that's what you saw in public, was we were pulling for each other.
I think that's a bit of a part of it. I think I've always liked this idea of using personal presentation as a form of activism. I think that we all have our choice of how we show up in spaces and in community, and part of that is how we choose to dress ourselves. And I think anything that can help me authentically express myself and also push the envelope and push some boundaries while still respecting most of the boundaries that I've inherited, I think it's a bit of a clever and respectful way to be an activist in the queer community.
For me, you dressing me has enabled me to step more into the role, more into to being the executive director of San Francisco Pride. Someone saw me in an outfit that you had put me in, another executive director in the city, and she said, Suzanne, I've never really seen you wear clothes, but you are wearing clothes now. And I realized the power, because it's been a process to transition at 48 years old, to learn how to present yourself as a professional woman. I had done that, but I had never given enough thought to what I was wearing. I looked professional, but I didn't have a distinctive look, and I wasn't wearing the clothes, and so I'll always be indebted to you for that. You know, I think my son would laugh. I wore a lot of khakis and polos, and that was kind of a uniform I hid in, you know, all those years. And to put on that dress was magical. It was like I was special. It was like I would love everybody to look at me in this like a princess. And that was empowering. I want that for all trans women, to have that feeling and to know that they are special. And unfortunately, you know, I was raised as a little boy not to be a princess. No one was supposed to really look at me, and I wasn't supposed to feel pretty. And I, you know, I captured that moment. I could just feel it. It was something else.
There's no guidebook to being a human being, much less one who is intersectional as a white trans woman from the South, or someone like me who is a queer Vietnamese son of refugees who happened to be born in one of the greatest places in the world, who was able to lean into that empowerment of being a Bay Area native and now a San Francisco native almost. I've lived here for almost 20 years, and no, there's no instructions on how to do this. So I think people like Suzanne and me, we're doing what we can to honor the legacy of our ancestors and transcestors who did this activism work before we did, and we're trying to put our own spin on it. We're being respectful of our elders while also trying to push the movement forward in whatever way that we can, being as respectful as possible, but also being disruptive and innovative and adaptive to whatever the world throws at us, and being responsive to the people that we serve and represent. I think it's multi-layered, multifaceted. It's hard, and it's deeply meaningful as well.
I'm the first trans person to ever be an executive director of Pride, yes.
Anywhere.
You know, I couldn't answer that. I think I am the first trans woman to be executive director of either New York or San Francisco, I think. But I don't know of another before me. But Minneapolis now has a trans man as their executive director. I know that. But I do know for sure in San Francisco that I'm the first transgender executive director.
I see that as a milestone. A lot of people see it as a milestone, but I cannot help but wonder why it took so long.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think everyone knows the movement began with mostly white gay men leading it, and San Francisco Pride, you know, not unlike any other of the Pride organizations, was heavily centered around white trans men, and the lesbians, again, mostly white. And San Francisco Pride, to its credit, people like Ken Jones and Lisa Williams, Josh Smith, have all been black activists that were in leadership roles at San Francisco Pride, but no transgender executive director. I think it's, you know, I feel that responsibility. Like, I want to make sure that people in San Francisco, people in the world know that there are competent business leaders, executive directors of organizations in this country, and we are capable of anything that we put our minds to. And I know it's important. I know when I walk into rooms now in San Francisco, in our community, you know, the trans women light up when I come, and that's like so special that you would have that feeling, but I know it comes with a big responsibility. They're counting on me to be competent and to prove that we deserve the respect of people in the city.
All the above. I did want to just build off of what Suzanne said. I think that This is a very unlikely pair. On paper, like we couldn't be more different. But what Suzanne said about me drawing off of my experience and helping her, I mean, it went both ways. Suzanne taught me how to be human because I was so regimented in the way that I wanted to deliver my service to my community that I forgot how to actually just love a little bit more, love myself more, and love my people more. And Suzanne taught me that too. So we taught each other many, many things. And so when it came time, honestly, for me as the president at the time to make that hiring decision and to represent the interests and the desires of my fellow board members, it was the best decision that I could have made during my presidency to ensure that Suzanne Ford became our permanent executive director and the first openly trans person to hold that role. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear and that I got to say that.
To be in charge, to have the responsibility to make sure that the next generations get to experience San Francisco Pride on that plane, like, oh my God. The importance of what we're doing, it's good once in a while to get away from it a little bit and look back and realize, oh my God, we're San Francisco Pride. We were leaders in the world. The world looks to see what we're doing, and they still do, and they're going to this year more than ever. And that is a huge responsibility. And so sometimes I think we have to make sure that even when our community is sparring with each other, and we do a lot of that here in San Francisco, we have to take a step back and realize, it's fine to get into those sparring and to stand up for what you believe, but the number one thing that we have to do is make sure 55 years from now that there will be a San Francisco Pride and our community will be sparring with each other, and some people will say they're not coming, but that's fine. But the organization is more important than any of those inter-arguments we might have with each other.
To the question about whether or not we still need Pride, even if we were to see an influx of support, the answer is a resounding yes. Because SF Pride has been around now for 55 years. That's 55 years, it's more than half a century of activism, advocacy, people actually doing the work, people getting hurt, and people being very vulnerable in the face of all of this hate and fear. And that work, that half century of work, needs to be honored. And it serves as a reminder that we can never take what we have worked for granted. This is why, in my opinion, Pride will always be relevant. And I think a lot of our community, especially with recent electoral outcomes, they would say that now more than ever is a time that we need to ensure that we still have space, that we have these activations of visibility and affirmation and joy to show the world that, one, we're not going anywhere, two, we are worthy of your love and support, and three, we will do what we need to fight to protect that worthiness of love and support. Yeah. So I would argue that Pride, and particularly SF Pride as being the world's most iconic Pride organization, can and should always exist.
It will never be finished. I think if we've learned anything over the last 4 or 5 years, we should have learned that. We had the Supreme Court decision, the Obergefell decision, gay marriage was legalized, and a lot of people in our community took a deep breath and said, we have everything that the straight people have, and we've arrived.
Of course, I'm so proud to be here to celebrate this occasion and to bring you both together again. So thank you so much.
Well, it was only a small amount of people that had arrived, not all of us. And I think we learn all the time that's not good enough. And our community will always remind us. It's like the police issue. Today if I get pulled over, as long as I follow the law and I hand the officer my ID, as a white trans woman, I'm probably going to be okay in the Bay Area. But I can't say that for everybody in my community. And if I can't say that for everyone in the community, that means there's more work to be done. And San Francisco Pride is responsible for that work. And it will never be done. It's too deep. how I was raised in Kentucky in the 60s and 70s created a lot of fearful, hateful people. And it's going to take centuries of work to take that out of our collective soul, if you will. So I think if anything we've learned, like we thought Trump was gone, we thought we were finished. We're not finished. And so I think that we should learn that lesson this year, like that should be talked about a lot. We will never be finished in my lifetime. And that means Pride needs to last for another 60 years. Because I'm going to live for a long time.
The Pride movement is often credited as having started in New York City during the Stonewall riots, when Martha P. Johnson threw the first brick. This is a protest against police brutality in 1969, and then that kind of gave birth to the modern Pride movement. But we would be remiss not to also acknowledge that 3 years prior to Stonewall, there was something called the Compton's Cafeteria Riots, 1966, when similarly, trans women were just so fed up about police brutality against the LGBTQ community that they also fought back in a very visible way. But I think it's important to acknowledge that history and honor it and respect it and remind ourselves that this very special place deserves its spot in the broader LGBTQ historical narrative. So much has been done in this city. We have the first ever Office of Transgender Initiatives, for example, at City Hall. That had never been done before. We have the world's first drag laureate, which is very recent. And that's just in the last few years. If you go back further, you'll know that the Summer of Love it took place here in San Francisco. And while that wasn't explicitly queer, it was still a demonstration of solidarity of people who just deserve love.
Which is important for deadheads like me. Yeah, that's the other bonus of living in San Francisco.
So in essence, San Francisco is as much of a character in our stories as each of us activists. There's something deeply special about this place.
And like the goal should not to be tolerant. I hate that word.
Yeah,
Let's be celebratory. And I feel, it's funny, they're all different experiences, but sometimes I feel like an immigrant. Like you hear my accent, people in the room will go, where is she from? But growing up in the 70s in Owensboro, Kentucky is about as far away from San Francisco as you can get at times. Obviously, I don't wear a sign around that says I'm from Kentucky, but you can tell as soon as I open my mouth. And I think in the city, the initial reaction might be, where is she from? But eventually we get to what people, what do they bring to the table? Not how do they look? Not what gender are they? Are they here because they want to give back? Which I hope that what we're doing, but I think both of us get accused a lot of times. We have been together and we have had so much exposure thanks to people like you. And it looks glamorous sometimes. But the number one thing I want people to know is that we've been putting in the work for other people, not ourselves. And that's like what's important in the city.
And I think, yes, to all of that. And the work itself is absolutely vital to furthering our movement as a community. I think it's also important to lean into who we are, Suzanne and me, and what we look like, because I think it's important for others, as Suzanne mentioned earlier, to see people who maybe look and talk like them and us, and to see people like us in positions of influence and power, people able to make decisions and influence policy. It's not lost on me that as an intersectional queer person of Asian descent, I live in a city that is slightly more than 1/3 Asian identified. The residents of San Francisco are about 34% Asian identified, which is wild. Add to that my queerness. I think it's incumbent on someone like me, as well as someone like Suzanne, to show the world that you can be a loving, driven leader in community and look a little bit different and sound a little bit different because then that ushers in the next generation of advocates and activists like us who need to see themselves represented in spaces of leadership so that they can then self-validate and say, you know what? If these two randoms from vastly different parts of the country can come together and lead the world's most iconic queer affirming organization, well, then maybe I can too. And I think that is the charge of every leader in this space. It's not to have more followers, it's actually to inspire and create more leaders.
Yeah.
And I think that is a job that Suzanne and I have always taken very seriously. I think it's correct to identify, and I'll just speak from my personal experience, growing up Asian in the United States, a lot of, especially Vietnamese people, came over as refugees. This is after the fall of Saigon in the mid to late 1970s. And what we saw, and we still continue to see today, is broadening from Vietnamese communities, just the broader Asian Pacific Islander community. We see a lot of families kicking their children out if they come out as queer, as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. And I think someone like me who's been very fortunate to not have been raised in an environment like that, to have been raised in a very loving, accepting, affirming family that might not have understood what it meant to be a queer person or what it meant to have a queer child in their family, they chose love. And pointing back to the example that you identified a moment ago about having my mom with me by my side at every major milestone and achievement of my life, I love sharing that story.
My mama told me when we were all born superstars. She rolled my hair and put my lipstick on in the glass of her boudoir. There's nothing wrong with loving who you are, she said. 'Cause I made you perfect, babe. So hold your head up high and you'll go far. Listen to me when I say I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause Buddha makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track. Baby, I was born this day. Fun fact, today's my actual birthday, y'all.
Because again, going back to visibility and representation, I want to show the world what it looks like to have a mother of a queer Asian child still love that person, that young person unconditionally. Well into decades of his or her or their life, I think it's important to share those stories. Because again, if we can humanize ourselves and show the world that the world will not end if you as an Asian parent or whatever minority, immigrant, refugee parent choose to love your child unconditionally, the world will not end. And in fact, you're going to give rise to the next generation of beauty and acceptance and affirmation and joy that otherwise would not exist because you're choosing to retreat back into antiquated ways of thinking and normative ways of living. So I think it's vitally important for people like Suzanne and me to uplift the fact that we do have loving families, families that have chosen to love us, not just in spite of how we were born different, but because of how we were born different.
My son and my relationship is phenomenal. And the reason it is because up until that point, I had been training him to be a man because I was training him to deal with all the fear I had about other men. I was afraid. I was like an athlete in high school and middle school. I was the basketball player. I picked the teams. I was the boy. And that's how I kept other boys off of me. They didn't suspect about me. But, you know, I wasn't able to support the other boys that couldn't hide. I couldn't support them because I couldn't, that would have damaged who I was. So all those things were going into my raising my son, and those are not things you want to give to your son. But my son is very confident about who he is. He is a musical star. And I said something to him after I transitioned, and he turned around and said, look, if you get to be you, I get to be me. Basically, get off my back about what kind of boy I am. And from that moment, our relationship changed. He's been able to teach me so much about being who we are and loving other people. And my son gets excited when one of his friends wins something. I did not have that ability. I do now. Like, I've been so happy for when Win has been recognized. I've been able to have that feeling of, that's my friend, and thank God. And my son taught me that. So there's a lot to be said for taking that risk and being who we are, and what it will do to other people, and how it will embolden them in their lives. My wife we have a house in Washington. She lives on an island in the middle of this big lake. You have to take a boat back and forth when you go get groceries or anything, and that's her dream. And she lives at this house for most of the year. And she is this tough, badass woman, and she would have never got that dream if I had have stayed that domineering male figure that the whole house was about my dream. And that's not the way it is now. We all three of us have our own dreams. My son's at Cal Poly. He majors in mathematics. He's going to be a math teacher in high school, a high school math teacher. And those were all because I came out. All of those dreams, and so we can't let, that's another thing, we cannot let what the straight wisdom in this country tells us is possible, because it's not always right. It just isn't. And that's why it's so important that you hear queer voices like Win and his community, and my voice in my community, and us working together is exactly that. We have a wonderful different way of looking at life, and people can benefit from that. It's not a death sentence, it's a life sentence.
So what I'm hearing is that by allowing yourself to be yourself, you're actually giving the license to other people to be themselves too.
Yeah, like how many times do we tell our kids, I did it, you can be anything you want. But then my son came home the first time from school, he changed from engineering to math. He said, I'm not going to be an engineer, I want to be a teacher. I was like, what? You're going to do what? We do it all the time to people. We tell them that, and then we don't do it ourselves. And if we're not doing it ourselves, are we actually really, when we tell them that, people watch to see what we do, not what we say.
I like to think of SF Pride as not just a platform, but also a moment and a movement. It's an actual thing that needs to be nurtured and cultivated, because we, as leaders and activists and advocates, we have a responsibility not just to our ancestors and transcestors and honoring and uplifting their legacy and their work, but also to the next generation. We need to show our people of all ages what the world can look like if we just love each other. I had the occasion of watching the recent Golden Globes Awards when Wicked won one of the awards as for box office. And the director, John Chu, who happens to be an Asian person from the Bay Area, Palo Alto, I think, he was able to have a few words at the microphone, and something he said will stick with me for some time. He said he leverages this platform of visual storytelling, filmmaking, as a defiant act of optimism and joy. Mm-hmm. And those words resonated with me in that moment, and they still today, because I think those of us who are even tangentially involved in the Pride movement, we also see it as a defiant act of optimism and joy. Walking down Market Street, the iconic Market Street parade route, every last Sunday of June in San Francisco, that is our people's and our city's way of showing the world, hey, LGBTQ people are beautiful and they are here. We've existed now and we have always existed and we will always exist. We are worthy of your embrace and we are worthy of your not just tolerance, but acceptance and affirmation and love and joy. So I think being a part of this movement and this moment and doing it with someone who I love and cherish so deeply, it's not only a gift that I get to live and relive day after day and year after year. I see this as a gift that our people are entrusting us with, that we get to serve them and to make sure that they feel centered and nurtured and cultivated and affirmed and joyful. Because ultimately what we are doing is we're defiantly acting in the name of optimism and joy.
So I will share the theme of the parade since no one will see this for a while. The theme this year is Queer Joy is Resistance, which is so much what Wynn just said. And I was so proud of the board because I think this year we have to do two things. We are angry about what decision this country made a few months ago. It feels very personal for queer and trans people especially. It feels very personal that this country has made that decision to support that person. And so we are angry about that, and I want our people to be allowed to be angry, but we also in this city are going to find joy in many, many moments over the next 4 years. We just are. We found joy in the middle of the HIV crisis. And so I was proud that the board realized that, hey, we can do two things. We can resist and we can be joyful at the same fucking time. And so that's gonna be my message. I'm gonna be all over the media, which is gonna suck because Wynn's not gonna be with me doing it. But I'm going to say that over the next 5 months in this city, everywhere I go, on the last Sunday in June, we are going to show up and resist, and we are going to be joyous. We are going to have the biggest party that this city throws every year, and it's going to be the 55th anniversary of having a party that is in itself resistance. I think it's really going to be an important year.